Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. Hope you're all very well this evening. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, I want to talk a little bit about capital gains tax. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but it's there's a prominent business owner who's complaining about perhaps the idea of having capital gains tax increase in the budget. A little bit about asylum seekers, and a good friend of the show, Zoe Gardner. I want to show you a clip with her. The budget, of course, is going to be the big thing, and of course, it seems like Kemi Bandenoch is going to be the leader of the Conservatives going forward. But I want to start off with this story here. So, Brewdog boss, don't make it worse. So, the boss of Brewdog beers was interviewed by Sky News, and he was asked about capital gains tax. So let's see what he had to say.
To you, James. Let's just start, first of all, on what your objections are. Why do you think potentially increasing capital gains tax is a bad idea?
Well, thank you for having me. And firstly, I think the government have got such an unenviable task. They've been dealt a terrible hand after 14 years of Conservative government. Taxes have never been higher. We've never had more debt, and the level of services we receive for those taxes have never been worse. So they're in a very, very difficult situation. And my advice to them would be just don't make it worse. So an increase in capital gains tax, I think, is going to have so many bad consequences for the UK economy. And I think it's going to lead to less tax in general. Firstly, so many fantastic entrepreneurs, founders, job creators are simply going to leave the UK. We're going to see a mass exodus.
Okay, we always hear this argument. If you increase taxes on businesses, then businesses will leave. But leave to where? Because if you're producing something in the UK, it's going to be very difficult for you to move your operations abroad and set up abroad and sell into the UK. Remember, Brexit. Okay, so there are checks, there are controls, there is a lot of paperwork if you're wanting to sell into the UK. So if your market is in the UK, then it's going to be difficult to move your operations, just up sticks and move your operations abroad. We always hear this scaremongering before the budget. Don't increase taxes on businesses. Don't increase taxes on the rich. Don't increase taxes on this, that, and the other, because it's going to drive businesses away. It's going to result in us closing down and stuff like that. We heard the same arguments when it came to the minimum wage. If you introduce a minimum wage, businesses will close down. All these small businesses that rely on paying people buttons, they're going to just sack all these people, and they're not going to hire anyone, and they're going to close down, or they're going to have to drive up their prices, and then people won't be able to afford their products. It's always this sort of scaremongering before the budget. Get in early, put in your complaints, try and scare the government into taking a different course of action, and hope for the best. At least this guy isn't attacking Labour. That's something. Yes. I know this business is a bit controversial because of some of the comments they've made, and move to an offshore PO box, no doubt. Yes. The exodus is bullshit. The one that will leave have speculative investors, the ones that do leave, and those who never produce anything in any way that actually helpful to the country. They're short-termists. Yes. So yeah, look, anyone who can move their money abroad can, they're going to move it anyway. If there's a slight increase in taxes, they're going to move their money out. But if you have a business, if you have assets, if you have facilities, you have a factory, you have workers, capital in the country, it's very difficult just to turn that into cash and move it abroad. And also to set up operations abroad just because capital gains tax increased it slightly.
Especially those in the tech sector. Secondly, for me, this is going to lead to less tax overall. It's people who...
Okay, so this is a valid argument. If you increase taxes, there's a risk that you'll actually bring in less money, because if businesses are not making so much, then of course they're going to, or if they fall below the threshold, if there's a new threshold, if you increase the rate of capital gains, or if you increase if you increase the rate of capital gains, some people will not pay as much. So there's a chance that the treasury will bring in less money. But that's a normal issue with tax anyway. You increase it to bring in more, and it's not always the case that you will bring in more, depending on the economy.
Who start businesses, they also pay national insurance. PAYE for their team, corporation tax. And like, we really need jobs. We need job creation. We need investment in our economy. We need
Exactly. You need investment. But in order to have investment, you need money. And the state, if you want the state to invest to rebuild infrastructure, for example, you need money for that. They need to raise taxes or borrow. But then borrowing is extremely expensive at the moment.
Economic growth, so it would be so anti-business and to disincentivize that, I think, is such a bad decision at this time. And finally, starting a business is so tough. I spend so much time with founders. 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So
and that's everywhere. See, this isn't just unique to Britain. It's very difficult to start a business. It's extremely complicated. There's a huge amount of cost involved, a lot of hidden costs. And that's the nature of business. And 95% of businesses fail in the first year. Exactly. But that's not something new, and that's not something that Labour is introducing.
What they're doing is incredibly difficult. They often work 7 days a week. They take very low wages. They put everything on the line, including their capital, to try and build something, to try and create something. So to increase the taxes on these people, the people that's going to drive the economic growth in their company at this time, I think it just leads to economic pain for the UK. I think it leads to less tax income, and it's completely the wrong thing to do at this moment in time.
Oh, okay, James, but let's start with where I think the government would argue they're coming from, which is that the public finances are not in a good state. They need to stabilise the economy, at least in the short term. They need to plug this hole they say exists. Do you accept that there is a problem with the public finances?
100%, there's a huge problem with the public finances, and they do need to plug this hole, and I'm all for helping them do that because that helps everyone in society. And if we take a step back and look at the macro picture, like the national debt is such a big issue. 8 to 9% of our tax payments just go in servicing that debt, and I think it's very difficult to get the system back into balance when the debt is...
I know, but what is the alternative? Like, if you're saying that the debt is too high, the only way to deal with that is to increase taxation, or it's to cut public services. But if you cut public services, if you cut investment, then what's going to happen? Businesses are going to close down. Like, think about it. If what needs to happen at the moment is there needs to be a massive injection of cash into the economy. The Tories have been taking money out of the economy over the last number of years. That's why there's been stagnation. There's been stagnation since 2008. And instead of injecting huge amounts of money into the economy, the Tories went down the road of austerity. Okay, we need to cut back public services. We need to run public services into the ground and rely on the private sector. The private sector will invest instead of the government. And that didn't happen because the private sector didn't want to invest in something that they weren't sure would yield a return. So if you have public money going into something and that attracts private investment, then you're going to see a return for both the government and for the private investors. But what the Tories were doing was pulling public investment out of projects and hoping that the private sector would pick up the slack, and they didn't. And that's why you've seen wages stagnating. That's why you've seen public services not improve. That's why you've seen the economy on its knees over the last number of years. Tories don't get tasered. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for that trumpet sound. Very kind of you. Thanks so much for your support. Dyson and Jacob Rees-Mogg left anyway. That was what Brexit was about, exactly, Kevin. Welcome anyone who's new to the stream tonight. Great to see you on the stream and hope you enjoy it. Further attacks on those on benefits should not be part of Labour's plan to fill the black hole or fill this hole. The fact that they tend to do so is morally wrong. Yes, and we're going to get to that a little bit later.
Is at the level as it is, which is why I'm absolutely distraught that the government are proposing to recategorize the debt to enable them to borrow more. For me, this is the governmental equivalent of a clever 6-year-old changing the time on the family clock so they can stay up a bit later. A neat sleight of hand, but everyone knows you're going to pay for it the next day. So
no, it's not exactly like that. I think that's a vast oversimplification. Public debt calculated in different ways, and there are certain things that are added and certain things that are removed. And it's possible that a recalculation of public debt, because it's really complicated and I'm not an expert, but for example, some aspects of public debt is related to replacement cost. So for example, if the government build a bridge and they calculate the replacement of that bridge into the cost of debt. Now, in some cases, that bridge may become twice as much to rebuild. That's a problem with this type of calculation. There's also the possibility that that bridge is no longer any use, so it won't be replaced. For example, it's to a village and you build a new road to go around the bridge, or the bridge is no longer necessary. So there's a lot of things built into the cost or the calculation for public debt that may not be accurate or may not be valid. So when it's calculated, it's not a single figure. There are a number of different figures that go into the calculation of public debt. So it's not just a case of cooking the books. There are real considerations that need to be taken as to, okay, what do we include and what do we not include? And you can't include everything, and even if you do include everything, including everything may require things like replacement value. But also there are issues, for example, of, something that the government builds is considered a liability and not an asset. But then it can also be considered an asset, but an asset that can't be sold. So for example, if the government build a hospital or maybe a prison, that is a huge investment, but there isn't really the possibility of them selling it if necessary. They can rent out some of these buildings, but if, for example, a prison, what can you do with the prison? You can't sell it. So there are different things different factors of, different aspects of public debt that need to be considered. But it's not as simple as just cooking the books.
Introducing the debt is the last thing we need at this moment in time. And I think if capital gain tax goes up, the government is going to get less tax income. People are going to leave the UK. People are not going to sell assets, and people are not going to start businesses, which is going to hinder as opposed to help this budget deficit we're facing.
Okay, so you accept this problem with the public finances. How does the government raise revenue then, James? I mean, or do they need to? Do they need to then make cuts to public services? As in, how would you plug that gap?
Great question. So for me, capital gains tax is for people starting a business, putting everything on the line for what they believe in and risking their own capital. I think there's far too many people out there abusing the system, and they get income taxed as capital gains, which is not what capital gains tax is for. So firstly, I would look to close that gap, and hopefully that goes some way to raising the amount of money we need here. And secondly, we've just got to look at how efficiently we can run our services, how efficiently we can run our country, because it's completely unsustainable.
We can't look at public services through the prism of efficiency. I see we have somebody from New York. Welcome to the show. You can't look at it through efficiency. You have to look at it through a different prism. For example, when it comes to the NHS, you can't look, and we keep hearing about how the NHS needs to be more efficient. No, you want the opposite of efficiency in the NHS. That might sound counterintuitive, but the NHS needs massive amounts of redundancy. Why? Pandemics. We saw during the pandemic there wasn't sufficient equipment, there wasn't sufficient staff, there wasn't sufficient PPE, there wasn't sufficient anything. Everything was in short supply. Now, if you had redundancy, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But the NHS, this is the big problem I have with certain politicians talking about economics like a household budget, or talking about economics through the prism of business. And I tear my hair out. There's not much left, but I tear my hair out whenever, what's that guy from Reform UK, Richard Tice, starts talking about, I used to run a business and we need to run the NHS like a business, or we need to run the government like a business. No, absolutely not, because they're completely different. In a business, you want to maximize efficiency. That's completely correct. That makes perfect sense. You want to reduce your costs as much as possible. But the NHS, public sectors are completely different. You need to have redundancy. You need to have extra. For example, the NHS needs to have extra. Tice the line. You need to have extra because of a pandemic or a crisis, the winter crisis, for example. You need to have people sitting around. In a business, you don't want people sitting around doing nothing. That's a waste. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. But in the NHS, you need to have people sitting around doing nothing because an emergency will come in. Maybe there's an accident. Maybe there's a terror attack. Maybe there's a pandemic. Maybe there's a natural disaster. You want to have people ready to go, sitting around, because it's completely different to a business. So it's frustrating when you hear people like Richard Tice and others saying, we need to run the NHS, we need to run the government like a business. None of these politicians have any business experience. It's not like a business. It's completely different.
For us to continue borrowing more. And if we continue to raise taxes, we take all the incentives out of the system and we're not going to get the economic growth we need to get us back in an even keel.
So you seem to be, by not talking about it, suggesting that maybe cuts all the way forwards to things like public services. And many people, many voters out there feel that actually public services are in a terrible state and they need investment. And that is why...
See, this is the problem with asking somebody who's a business owner about how would you run the government? I'd cut public services. See, and in a business, that's what you need to do. You need to say, okay, where am I losing money? Well, cut it off. I'm wasting money here, cut it off. And that makes sense in business, but it does not make sense in the public sector. It doesn't make sense in government. It makes zero sense. And it's pointless asking the Brewdog boss, how would you run a government? Because he would run it like a business. And it would make sense to him. And then what would happen? Public services were underneath. They're called public services for a reason, because they serve the public. They're not customer services. They don't serve customers or clients. They serve the public. And you need to have redundancy. You need to have extra. You need to run them in a way that they serve the public. A very good example of this. A bus company. Private bus companies will concentrate on profitable routes. But as a society, we have to have an extra bus available to go out to the middle of nowhere, up the mountain, to pick up a few pensioners to take them into town. As a public service, is that profitable? It's not. But as a public service, we need to provide that as a society because we want the old people to be able to get into town. They can't drive, they can't walk, the bus service is all that's available. It's a cost, exactly, it's a cost, but it's a cost that we're willing to pay as a society. And that's why it's important that we don't run things like a business. Can you imagine if you run everything like a business? The old people would be stuck on the mountaintop. They'd never be able to get into town. We wouldn't have libraries. We wouldn't have, public swimming pools. We wouldn't have all these things that we take for granted in a sense that the Tories are trying to get rid of. But these are services that are not designed to make a profit. They're there to serve the public. Peter, thank you so much for that super chat. Emergency, like after a piss up in a... Thanks for that. We have a comment from Alistair. Great to see you on the stream tonight, Alistair. After April next year, you will need a visa to holiday in Europe, so hold on to your booking holidays. Oh my goodness. I heard a story about Scotland where they were talking about allowing the Scottish government to issue visas, but then the Labour government said, no. We're not going to allow that. We're not going to devolve immigration because that would actually help Scotland. We don't want that. And once again, I can't understand why there isn't I can't understand any argument to say that Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland shouldn't have their own immigration scheme. Why can't they issue visas? I guess it would create a problem within the UK because, in England you wouldn't be allowed to cross the border from Scotland into England because you'd need a visa. So it probably would create a few problems. But as we know, the care sector in Scotland is desperately in need, like every part of the UK, is in desperate need of workers, and they can't bring people in because they have to rely on the Home Office. GB News is losing money. Fantastic. They have a membership scheme now, a bit like Trump anyway. Anyway, guys, let's move on to our next story, which is Kemi Bandenoch will need to go beyond diehard Tories to rebuild party, Peer says. Ruth Davidson, a Scot, I think. Maybe some people in the chat would disagree with that. Ruth Davidson, a former head of the Conservatives in Scotland, says Kemi Bandenoch clearly thinks she's winning, as she's doing very well with the media compared to her rival Robert Jenrick. So I just saw the comment here from Ivan. Ivan says sending DWP officials to mental health patients in hospitals is for the birds. Mental illness at a critical level means people can often not interact with their family and friends, let alone the DWP. Yes. So I was going to cover this a little bit later, but thanks for that super chat now, Ivan, and I agree 100%. Look, this is insane. No pun intended. Look, people are struggling with mental health issues as a consequence of a whole range of problems. For example, the pandemic, the cost of living crisis. So people are struggling because they can't afford to pay their bills. They can't afford to feed their families. They're working more. Maybe they're asking their boss for more hours. The boss is saying no. People are relying on benefits. They're going to food banks. And I just think, I don't have kids, but I can imagine somebody who's struggling at the moment and has kids, they're dreading the next couple of months where, little children will be asking, when can I write my letter to Father Christmas? What can I ask for Christmas? And that adds to the stress. People who are struggling to get by, worried about, okay, what letter is, worried about seeing the postman come up the road and they're okay, what bill is going to come through the door this time? How much am I going to have to pay? Or if you're in a worse situation where you have one of those top-up meters where you have to keep putting money into it and you're looking at the bills. You're looking at, okay, can I afford to keep the house warm this winter? Can I afford to, keep the TV on? All of these stresses that the politicians don't understand or don't care about. I think it'd be great for members of parliament to have to go through just a week, without all their privileges. A week of trying to balance the cost of living with making sure that the kids get to school on time, that they're fed, that they have their clothes clean, that you're able to, that you're not worried about, can I afford the washing powder or can I afford to switch on the washing machine because it's expensive? Living in a damp, moldy flat, worried whether you can pay the rent, worried whether you can feed your family and pay the rent. These are all things that add to stress. And then, people are burnt out. They're stressed out. They're struggling. Maybe they go to their boss and say, look, I need a few hours. And the boss says no. Maybe they are burnt out and they call in sick. And they're told, if you keep calling in sick, you're going to be fired. If you're on maybe a 0-hour contract or something like that. You don't have stable work. And many people go sick. They just can't take it anymore. And and as Ivan has pointed out, and this is a story that's come out this week, it seems an old Tory policy of going into hospitals to convince people who are struggling with mental health issues, maybe if you got a job, that'll help you out. These are not psychiatrists or psychologists that are going in. These are people from the DWP, from the job centre. And I've spoken about this before, and I know some people, I think one or two of them may be on the stream tonight, who shared stories with me, who said that, I've gone into the DWP and I had, a person who has no experience of mental health, no experience of physical health, no medical training, I should say, telling me, well, you look okay to me, you can do this job. Or stand up and walk around, a little bit. Okay, you can walk around and you can do this job. Or you have back problems, maybe you can sit in a chair all day and you can do this job. I need to find you a job. And this is the motivation. This is the goal that the job centre have, not to help people, but to push people into jobs, irrespective of whether they can do the job or not. And as Ivan has pointed out, many times people with serious mental health issues are unable to interact with their family and friends, never mind somebody from the DWP who arrives and with a form to be filled out and boxes to be ticked. And we don't know the state of mind of the person. But if you're in hospital, it's not like even you're at home, you're in freaking hospital and you're being met with people in health. Like, is it a good idea to help people get back into the workplace? Yes, it is. But there's a context required. Every situation is different. And because every situation is different, you need to have experts dealing with this. Not just somebody who's been, pulled off unemployment benefit and said, now you're working in the DWP, as is the case sometimes in the job centre. This is crazy. Because what you're doing is you're putting a huge amount of power into the hands of people who don't know how to use it, who don't have the experience, don't have the skills, and they're signing people off or forcing people into jobs that they are clearly incapable of doing. And then what happens? They do the job for a few days and then they break down because they can't do that work. And then they're back to square one. And what do you think that does for their self-esteem? What do you think that does for their mental health? What do you think that does for their chances of improving? Very, very little. When I worked as thank you so much, guys, for your comments. And because, every experience is different, and it's great to have your comments and your experiences. I see Bill says, when I worked as a cleaner, one guy lost it and had some kind of mental meltdown. He couldn't handle the pressure, and he was only a young bloke. And it's not necessarily somebody who's elderly or middle-aged. Sorry kids, Santa caught a severe cold after no heating allowance and ain't coming. Well said, Janie. The real wealth is having muscular physical body, and even wheelchair users can play Paralympics. Is what makes people happy, not jobs, money, and being in a car. There are people who want to do certain jobs. They want to fill their day. They would need to have a goal at the end of the day to have completed something during the day. And it's important that the DWP is there to help them. I keep reinforcing this point. It has to be there to help people, not to push people. The commentators, political commentators and politicians talk about carrots and sticks. No, there should be no stick. A carrot if necessary. Encourage people. Some people may need a bit of encouragement, but it's important that the people doing the encouragement know what they're doing, that they have some sort of training, that they're able to identify things. And it's really worrying now at this stage that, there are still people who believe, well, you look okay to me, or you look like you can do that job. I've spoken to people and they said, I've been at the job centre and they asked me to walk around, and I can walk around for 5 or 10 minutes. But after that, I need to sit down. I need to lie down. But in the job centre, I look perfectly healthy. But after an hour or two of doing a particular type of job, or even sitting at a computer for an hour or two, I start to have problems. But these things don't manifest in the job centre if you're there for 10 minutes. Pay in advance gas and electricity costs should be highly discounted, as the service providers have their money up front. That's a very good point, Chatty Rat. We have, I'm missing some of these chats, so let me read. We have one from Alistair once again. Thank you so much, Alistair. Very kind of you. You got into this you got to go into this meeting, so you're fit for work. Also, you got to put clothes on so you're fit to work. I have heard it. It's also things like that you never hear about. You're able to come to this meeting, then you're fit for work. Oh, you're able to get dressed, so you're fit for work. But I had to come to this meeting because if I don't, I'm going to have my benefits cancelled. I'm going to be sanctioned in some way. Oh, I didn't dress well. I'm probably going to be sanctioned, or at least talked down to, criticized, embarrassed by the coach or the people, the staff of the DWP. But by doing these things, of course, they're going to say that, well, you're fit to work. Stu, great to see you on the stream tonight. Hope you're well. Peter, once again, thank you so much, Peter. Why are the DWP allowed access? Why aren't they turned away at the lobby? I'm not sure what you mean, access to what. Well, they're going to access people's bank accounts eventually. So they're going to say how much money you're spending, where you're spending your money. That was a Tory policy that seems to be continued by the new administration, unfortunately. Ian Duncan Smith, the bad guy in Daniel Blake, got a knighthood. Yes. Let's not go down that road. So let's jump back to this story here. Kemi Bandenoch will have to rebuild the Tory party if she becomes leader, and will need to pivot by talking to those who are not diehard Tories, Conservative peer Ruth Davidson has said. Baroness Davison told Beth Rigby on the electoral dysfunction podcast, Miss Bandenoch, who is in the final two of the Conservative Party leadership contest, will have to look outside the core Tory voters to rebuild the party. She said the fact that Miss Bandenoch chooses to appear in media that is very much considered to have a high proportion of people who are already Conservative members and voters, such as the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, and GB News, portrays a certain lack of confidence. Yes, no, she's right. A stopped clock is right twice a day. Yes, Bandenoch is afraid to appear on anything other than, right-wing media, because she's going to just receive softball questions. And, this is going to be a problem for her, because as soon as she starts appearing on maybe Sky News or the BBC, well, the BBC, they won't give her too hard of a time. At least BBC Radio is a bit more critical. But the likes of Newsnight or whatever, unless it's Victoria Derbyshire, she's going to have an easy ride. But if she's on Sky News, on LBC, for example, I would love to see her interviewed by James O'Brien on LBC, but she's not going to do that. She's going to pick and choose the outlets. But once again, if you stick with what's easy, then people are not going to listen to you, and you're going to stay within your bubble. You need to go outside that. You need to be challenged by people. And if you're able to push back in a reasonable way, then you're going to win people over. But if you stay in the bubble of GB News, you're not going to be able to reach out to people outside that bubble. Ivan, again, thank you so much, Ivan. I think he means access to hospital. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. That was Peter's question before about the lobby. Yes, so when it comes to the hospital, to see mental health patients, I said that the doctors and nurses should stop them, and it could be a danger to their health. Of course, what they'll do is they'll say, look, we're here to provide training to people, and we're here to offer services, so anyone is free to join. But I imagine they would put pressure on people who are, maybe on benefits in hospital, and say, look, if you come to this work event, we won't sanction you. So, but you're right. They shouldn't be allowed into the hospital. They have no business in the hospital. They're not medical professionals. And once again, the people who should be signing people off as sick should only be medical professionals, or signing people off as fit to work should be medical professionals, not people with no medical training whatsoever. And that, unfortunately, is the case. People in the job centre, I think 99% of them have no medical training, and they're signing people off as fit for work. Because they have, see, the problem here is the motivation. It's not like they're signing people off and going, well, yeah, you look okay to me, but I don't know, but to be on the safe side, I'll put you down for a job and see how it works. No, it's not like that. They have a target to meet. They have to reach a target by the end of the month. And if they don't, they'll lose their job. So what are they doing? They're looking at people and saying, look, I have 10 people to sign off today. I prefer not to sign these people up, but I have to reach my target. If I don't, then my boss is on my back. And that's not the way it should be. Freckle Punny, great to see you on the stream tonight. Great to see you back. Says, Bandenoch, like most black and Asian Tories, have been more rabid than their white counterparts in order to get an advancement within the party. Yeah, isn't it strange how, some people describe this as pulling up the ladder when it comes to immigration. Her family came from an immigrant background, but she's doubling down on being anti-immigration as much as possible, and how we need to stop the boats and push people back. And she's not as bad as Generic or Priti Patel or Suella Braverman, but give it time, and we're going to hear probably something like that from her. But yes, this idea that British culture is being undermined by foreigners and stuff like this. This is sort of language. The far right within the Conservative Party love this, because it's like she's able to say it without the criticism. So if it was a white male politician, for example, who was saying some of the things that Suella Braverman was saying, they would have been called out in the media as racist. But Suella Braverman can say it exactly the same sort of thing, like there's an invasion of asylum seekers. Although I think that has changed somewhat. We're hearing more and more white politicians, particularly from Reform UK, use the same type of language. And I think they feel, well, the country has sort of moved to the right. In their eyes, the country has moved to the right. Or there's no punishment for saying these types of things. That they're saying it as well. So you're definitely onto something there. But I think while it used to be more the case in the past, I think it's becoming more and more mainstream, the type of language that the BNP would use 20 or 25 years ago. Alistair, thank you so much for that super chat. Poor, disabled, ill mental people, autistic. So who will be next for the chop? Next with the Tories or of both colours? I always say the people who have no representation, people who have no power, are easy to use as a scapegoat. So it used to be single mothers back in the 1990s, for anyone who's old enough to remember that. Then it was people on benefits. Then it was immigrants. Certain people want to continue to blame asylum seekers. And now it's, people who are not working. It's not just on benefits, because they can't really blame everyone on benefits, because 40% of people on universal credit are also working. So they can't, just say benefits, but they're saying people who are not working. Oh, it's your fault. The economy is in such a bad state. But instead of actually looking at why people are not working, many people can't work because of the NHS waiting list. They can't work because they're sick. They can't work because there are no jobs available. They can't work because whatever jobs are available don't pay enough to cover the cost of living. Like the idea that there are people who are doing 0-hour contracts and having to rely on food banks. When did that become a thing? Well, about 15 years ago. They're using her, says Suzanne. Thanks so much, Alistair. We have a super chat from Sam Priest. Thank you so much, Sam Priest. Rhetoric, who first came up with the leave ECHR idea and when. Well, it's actually quite an old idea. It came out, it sort of surfaced back in about 2011, 2012. I remember hearing about it. And it was the far right within the Conservative Party. They were like, we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, it sort of bubbled under the surface for a long time, and it really came to the forefront. I think maybe in the last year and a half or 2 years. So most people don't even know what it is. And the Conservatives are relying on people not knowing what it is. And they, at least the Conservative Party seem to be split. Even Bandenoch is saying, look, leaving the convention will not stop immigration. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a panacea. But so the Conservative Party is a little bit split on that. But a lot of them are still pushing this idea, if we leave the convention, we can stop immigration. But it's about stripping away protections for British people. That's what the goal is, like with Brexit. Strip away protections for businesses, for consumers, strip away protections for workers, strip away protections for the environment, and wrap it up in English nationalism. That's the way Brexit was sold. And this is pretty much the same thing again. Notice that Robert Jenrick, when he was asked about the Good Friday Agreement, he was like, oh, well, we can have a British Bill of Rights. Yes, but the point of the Good Friday Agreement, the ECHR in relation to the Good Friday Agreement, is that there's an external court. There's somewhere for you to go if you don't believe the British government is looking after your rights. So if Robert Jenrick becomes Prime Minister and he introduces a British Bill of Rights and he's not respecting it, then where do people go? They go nowhere. So the point of the European Convention on Human Rights is that there's an international court. Notice that they try to keep calling it a foreign court. It's not a foreign court. It's in a foreign country, but the UK is within its jurisdiction. So it's not a foreign court, it's an international court. They don't say the ICJ is a foreign court, it's an international court. Maybe the European Court of Human Rights should change its name to the International Court of Human Rights, although there may already be one of those. Then it'd be very difficult for them to describe it as a foreign court. Look, it's not a foreign court also because there's a British judge there. And once again, I really wish journalists would bring this up. You have people like Sophie Ridge on Sky News. You have Kay Burley on Sky News. You have Andrew Neil on Times Radio. You have all these people who understand this, who know this, who know it's not a foreign court, who know that there's a British judge on its panel, but never say it. Why don't they say it? Like during an interview, just a moment, you do understand that it's not a foreign court, that it's an international court. Because as soon as you would say that, Robert Jenrick or whoever is pushing this point would have to clarify. It's a foreign court because it's in a foreign country. But then you say, but that's nothing to do. If it was in London, it would still be an international court. You do understand that. Like, I understand that the journalists have a job to do is to inform the public. Because if they're not asking the right questions, if they're not pushing back, the public are misinformed. So people go away after the interview thinking, okay, well, it's a foreign court. Why are we taking rulings from a foreign court? Do we have a judge there? I don't know. Probably not, because it's a foreign court. We left the European Union, the European Court of Human Rights. Maybe we should have left that as well because it's European. This is what filters down into people's minds. If journalists don't ask the right questions, we're not expecting GB News journalists to ask these questions because they're not real journalists. They're hacks. They start off on the same page as the Tory politician or right-wing commentator that they're interviewing. So they're not going to push back. But it's the job of the media, it's the job of journalists to ask questions, but to inform the public. It's a disaster. You have failed as a journalist if the public go away with misinformation. Sorry, a bit of a rant there, but I think it was necessary. It's everyone has their biases. Okay, that's, but it's important that the public go away with the right information. Not getting notification, just see them as they appear. Yoni, thank you so much, Yoni. Yoni in Finland says, when first past the post only spawns culture wars, it's PR time. Exactly, yes, there needs to be a move. And I'm a bit concerned because Keir Starmer and Labour said that they were going to introduce or talk about, or people on the outside or on the inside were saying that they were going to push for PR within the Labour government, and we haven't heard anything about it. Now, maybe it's still early, it's just over 100 days, but the wheels need to start moving now to move away from first past the post. Because as we keep saying, Labour won this time, but under first past the post, they may not win the next time, and the Tories could be back in again. And first past the post doesn't keep Nigel Farage out. That was one of the arguments, don't bring in PR because you'd end up with Nigel Farage in Parliament. Well, how has that worked out? Thanks, Yoni. Ivan again, thank you so much, Ivan. Bandenoch has said abhorrent things about autistic people. She said we get an advantage and better treatment. That couldn't be further from the truth. And once again, you have these politicians who don't understand what they're saying, but they know it will encourage other people to come out and vote for them. Oh, look, she's saying terrible things about disabled people with mental health issues. Well, that's right, because I've been listening to GB News all day, and they've been telling me that a lot of them are faking it, or they're not really sick, or it's they look fine to me, or it's everyone is sick now. This is the rhetoric that they're putting out. This is the line that they're going with. Well, everyone, people have a stressful day, and then they diagnose themselves as depressed, and then go off, quit their job and live off the state. And I'm tired of that, because, as I keep saying, these right-wing media outlets are designed to push a narrative, and the narrative is lower taxation for the richest in society. And they don't want money going to benefits. They don't want money going to the public sector. They don't want money going into the NHS. The outlets exist to push the idea that the richest people in society need more money. Okay? They need more of their own money. We should stop taking money from them. There was a very good example of this, and I covered it a few weeks back, where a guy from GB News was talking about inheritance tax and capital gains. Inheritance tax is paid by a very, very, very small minority of the public. And when I'm talking about very small, I'm talking about 0.01% or something like that. We're talking about a few thousand people. Now, do you think it's a few thousand very poor people or very, very rich people? Well, you know where that's going. So why would somebody on GB News who's speaking to ordinary people who are not multimillionaires and billionaires be talking about how increasing inheritance tax will be a terrible thing? See, it's about convincing them, ordinary people, that you're probably going to have to pay inheritance tax. Obviously they don't, because they don't earn millions, and most people don't have extra homes that they can sell off or that they can pass on to their children. They normally just have their own home. And you notice that the right-wing media never mention these things. They never mention how many people, what percentage of the population pay inheritance tax. And then when it comes to capital gains as well, your average person on the street is not paying capital gains tax. But it's about convincing people that, all taxes are bad. And of course, we should get rid of these taxes. Why should we get rid of it? Because there are people on benefits who are lazy. People on benefits don't need this money. Why are our hard-earned tax pounds going to pay people who are sitting on their sofa, eating junk food, watching reruns of The Chase or something every day? Why are we paying for this? These people should be working. This is the rhetoric. This is how it works. It's about convincing ordinary people, middle-class people in particular, that you need to have more punitive measures against people on benefits because it's wasted money. And instead, you should be funneling more money to the wealth creators, the people who are creating all the wealth. And this is why you hear so much about billionaires leaving. We need to stop the billionaires from leaving. We need to stop the millionaires from leaving. They never say who these millionaires are. They never name them, apart from that guy who has the turkey teeth and the weird face and hair, who was a plumber guy. But he spends more time in Britain than he does in Spain, it seems, because he's always on the frigging TV. Anyway, I was meant to do a comedy break, but I just went on a rant, so we'll put it on at the end. Mr. E, thank you so much for that super chat. We're all in the WEF pot. Same soup, different label. Smoke and mirrors. Please don't fool yourself with their bullshit. There are two groups of people in society. The ones who own everything and then everyone else. So you're in two categories. When the Conservatives are trying to push this idea of working people, criticizing Labour over taxes on working people, they keep bringing up, well, are people who run businesses, multimillionaires and billionaires, are they working people? If you're earning a wage from working, you're a working person. If you own the business, doesn't matter how big the business is or how small the business is, then you're not a working person, unless you're paying yourself a wage. But if you're taking money from through shares, or if you're just living off the profits of something, you're not a working person. That's the difference. But they try to present it as everyone is a working person. Yeah, those pesky underclass working their arses off, people in work claim the most. Rod Stewart? No, how dare you say Rod Stewart? He's a pound shop version of Rod Stewart. Or what's that Chinese website? I forget. It used to be wish.com. There's a new one, I think. Millionaires leaving. Where do they take their money? Where do they make their money here? So leave and profit stays here. This is one of the things, I think it was Gary Stevenson mentioned. If the asset is in Britain, Temu, thank you so much for that. If the asset is in Britain, the asset will continue to make money. So if you move abroad, it doesn't make any difference because the asset is the thing making the money, not you. So, but that's never brought up either. David McGuinness, great to see you on the stream tonight. So let's move on because I've been talking a lot about this and just want to hit a few other stories before we finish. Cabinet ministers must accept budget cuts, says Harriet Harman. Used to be a fan of Harriet Harman, but this is pretty terrible. The Labour peer, a host of the Sky News dysfunctional podcast, electoral dysfunction, said all cabinet ministers are bound by collective responsibility for government decisions and knew the budget would be painful. So what's happening is, of course, as night follows day, the government are saying we need to cut. We need to impose a type of austerity. Now, I covered it in a video. If you haven't seen it, do check it out. Not so much about me, but from the IFS, they pointed out really astutely the idea of, okay, how do we calculate, how do we estimate whether austerity is being implemented? And if public services are cut by 1%, if growth, I should say, in public services is 1%, how can I say, growth in funding. So an increase in fund, let me rephrase that. If an increase in funding is just 1%, that's austerity because the cost is higher than 1%. So if you increase public services by just 1%, that's basically austerity. If you increase it by 2%, it's still somewhat austerity, but things are not getting better, they're not getting worse. And then if it's increased by 3%, then of course, things are improving. Now, 3% is not really enough to really improve the situation, but the general public should start to see some sort of improvement. Yeah, 2% is standing still. Well said, Mark. Put it much better than me. So if we see an increase of just 1%, then that's austerity. And there is a fear that because of the rhetoric we've heard so far, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has said, look, this is going to be a difficult time. We're going to have to tighten our belts. And also in that clip they mentioned the NHS. The NHS makes up about 40% of public expenditure. So if the NHS gets more money, it'll probably result in other departments taking a cut. Now, whether that will work out as a whole as austerity, maybe it's not all that important from a rhetorical point of view, but it means that some departments will have to make cuts. So the DWP will have to make cuts. How will that result? I miss Peter's super chat. Let me go back. Apologies for that. So for some reason, I'm not getting notifications. Peter, thank you so much for that super chat. Move the court to London. That would confuse them. Yeah, so that's about the European Court of Human Rights. So that'd be a good idea. Yeah. I don't know if the people in the current place where it is will be too happy about that. in Strasbourg. I don't think the people of Strasbourg would be, hey, no, we want to keep it here. It's good for business. No, I'm joking. But move it to London. It was actually in Britain at the very beginning, as was pointed out by Alan Drake. But it would be a good idea to. But it doesn't require movement. Just explain it to the politicians who are trying to sell people a lie. Yoni, once again, thank you so much, Yoni. Budget cuts do not a growth economy make. No, you need to increase public expenditure. But then Rachel Reeves' hands are tied, maybe in a sense, by herself, because she's going to stick with existing Tory spending rules. So she's not going to increase borrowing for capital. For day-to-day expenditure. She will increase it for capital expenditure, but then there is also a limit. But we're talking about different departments are going to have to probably make some cuts. No modern Western economy can survive on a 4% GDP cut drop every year. It's like starting the game 4 down. Yeah, well said, Archangel. Why did the ECHR move to France? I don't remember. I don't remember if Alan told me, or if we had actually asked that question. I think a lot of things were moving to France at the time, because it was seen as the center of Europe, I think. Garrett, thank you so much for that super chat. For your information on Kemi Bandenoch's biscuit. But I misread that. The National Autistic Society published a full fact-based rebuttal to her and her shower of bastards or bullshit. Her shower of bullshit. That's good. And of course she says that she never makes any gaffes. So who's right? Do we trust the National Autistic Society on autism, or do we trust Kemi Badenoch? I don't know. It's like, when it comes to the World Trade Organization, do you trust Andrea Leadsom or the former head of the WTO to know about the WTO? I would trust Andrea Leadsom. She knows her stuff better than any expert. I kid, of course. So it seems that, Harriet Harman is saying, look, government departments need to tighten their belts because Keir Starmer is saying, look, we have to move in this direction, which of course is going to create problems. Budget turmoil as several government departments fail to agree spending decisions by deadline. The Chancellor Rachel Reeves has said that there is a £40 billion black hole to fill ahead of the budget, so departments are being asked to find savings. How are departments supposed to find savings if the previous government have cut public expenditure over the last 14 years? It's like, and I don't want to use this analogy because it's normally, it's a bad analogy, but in respect to government departments, it's okay to use this analogy, but generally it's not a good one. But imagine in your household, you're being told, okay, we have to. My wages have not increased. Actually, my wages have gone down over the last number of years. Everything is more expensive, and I have to find a 4% or 5% cut in everything. Yes, but I've cut everything down to the bone already. So if government departments are going to have to find cuts, what are they going to do? They're going to lay off staff. That's normally the biggest cost. That's the first thing that they go for. They'll try and cut a few things, but then if they start laying off a lot of staff, they're going to run into problems with the trade unions. So it's going to be very difficult. They shouldn't be cutting. They should be increasing. But then, Rachel Reeves is not going to be off the mind of we need to increase government spending. We need to keep it capped, or we need to reduce it in some ways. And it's going to be very difficult for government I think we may actually see some government ministers resign, because they're going to have to face the staff, and it will start in some ways okay, we can cut this project, we can cut that project, but it's not going to make up enough, and they're going to have to eventually come to the point of laying off staff. And then if you don't have the staff, then you're not going to be able to run the department correctly, and you're not providing for the public. And you can't do all this through AI. You can't do all this through automation or efficiencies. It will go the same old way. We could be in the economic endgame, BRICS next week, and it's predicted that they might create a new gold standard currency. Fiat paper money is under massive pressure, and Western austerity. Although I think that we hear a lot of these things from time to time, but I think there's a lot of things coming together at the same time. For example, if Donald Trump becomes president again, I think this is going to create a lot of problems. People still have not come to full realization that the UK is not an advanced northern Western European economy anymore. No, and it can't tap into the ECB. But also it's put economic sanctions upon itself, which is the bigger point. It's cut itself off from its biggest market. That was insane. Anyway, let's. So in relation to, as you guys were talking about, I just want to cover this bit here.
To get this country working again, you're focusing on getting people back into work, including the long-term sick as well. So talk us through how radical those reforms are likely to be. How different are they going to be?
Well, at the moment, the help that should be there to get people into work when they need a bit of support or to change jobs just isn't there. I would say that our job centres are the most unloved public service. And that's not fair, because we have brilliant work coaches who, having...
Okay, but it's not the point that they're brilliant work coaches, is that they're not skilled in doing the job that you're asking them to do. You're asking them to make a decision on whether somebody's fit to do a job or not. And they don't have that skill. It's not about criticizing them. It's not about saying that they're bad people. They're not. In most cases, they're not. There are some bad people, of course, everywhere. But this is about deciding whether these people have the skills necessary to decide whether somebody is fit for work or sick. And they don't have these skills. Like, I don't have these skills. I couldn't do this job. If somebody says, okay, decide if this person is sick or fit for work or they should remain sick. I don't know. I'm not a medical expert.
Incredible knowledge and experience, but they can't use that experience because the system we have means that people go into a job centre, they see somebody for 10 minutes, tick the box, and you're off. And that has got to change, because we've had 14 years of failure when it comes to our economy and getting people into work. And so we will be laying out detailed plans.
Look, the idea of a job coach is not completely a bad idea, but it needs to be completely separate from the idea of, okay, there needs to be a two-tier process. First of all, your doctor decides if you're fit or ill. Okay? And if the doctor is not qualified to make that decision based on, if they're a GP and they're not a specialist, then you need to go to a specialist. Now, this is going to be a problem. But then if the doctor, after all of this, decides, yes, this person is fit to work, then you go to the job coach, not first. Because the job coach is not qualified to make that decision. And what will happen is that the job coach will send people to do jobs that they can't do. And this will make the situation worse.
A white paper this autumn to set out how we're going to change job centres, get the work system.
I just want to read power to the people who posted this comment here. This is very personal to me. I was put through literally years of hell by the sheer incompetence of the DWP, but she's wrong about just ticking the box. That's disturbing. She probably attended a day event at this. She followed around, went to a job centre and saw people ticking boxes and said, okay, well, this is not how things are working. I don't know whether she actually fully understands this or she's pretending. Either case is not a good scenario. But it can, if people just think about it logically, I don't understand why they're not thinking about it logically. Look, I know there's a shortage of GPs, a shortage of medical professionals, but you can't say we're going to skip that and we'll just get people to do these jobs anyway. What's the worst that could happen? Garrett, thank you so much for that super chat. UK government, we need to tighten our belts. Literally nobody ever, because we're all conditioned to fuck. No, we need to make some more fucking money. Yes, it's about pushing people into jobs that they can't do, just to get them off a list. In the job centre, my job is to bring down the number of people who are unemployed, then do it by any means necessary. Those who are unable to work need a UBI. Not just them. Everybody needs a UBI. She knows nothing about the WCA system. If she thinks it's easy, and that's what worries me. I expect Labour to deal with this more intelligently.
Much better integrated with health. So if a GP actually needs somebody to get help with their work because their health problems are actually related to their job, they can do that. And so that proper integration to really give people decent support to have a better chance in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but that's if somebody has already gone to the GP. But you're not talking about this in all cases. What the problem at the moment is, people are being told by the DWP that they can work. It's different if somebody is not feeling well and they go to their GP and say, look, I need some support. That's different.
In life.
However good that support might be, there may be some people who don't engage with the process. So what would happen to them? Will they have their benefits cut? Will there be sanctions?
In our social security system, there's always been rules. There are conditions.
Yes. Basically, the answer is yes. If you don't do as you're told, you're going to have your benefits cut. Now, people may not do as they're told for a number of reasons. I still keep reinforcing this point. Are there people who don't want to work, who are lazy, who are feckless, work shy layabouts? Yes, they exist. Okay, so let's take that on board. Now, those people, what do you want to do with them? Do you want to force them into jobs that they don't want to do, that they will not do right? Or would you prefer to forget about them in a sense and instead focus on people who would like to work? Because if you have a limited amount of resources, it makes more sense to spend those resources on people who are saying, look, I would like to work, but I don't have the skills, or I don't have the I need some help to train up, or to write the right CV and stuff like that. Instead of like spending time and effort on people who don't want to, just focus on the people who do. You have a limited amount of resources. It makes no sense doubling down on people who don't want to work. They will do the job for a day, and then they'll say, oh, I had a fight with the boss or something, and then they'll go back to the way they were before. There's no point wasting time on... Look, it's the reality. But they're a very, very, very small minority. The vast majority of people are not like that. So wouldn't it make sense to instead focus on the people who do want help, who do want support, than on those who couldn't give a crap? Because if you're wasting time on people who don't give a crap, you're taking time away from somebody who desperately needs support.
And there's duty on both sides. People who
stop the yachts and tax dodgers, well said Suzanne. Don't stop the boats, stop the yachts. Lady Moan, what's happening with her at the moment? UBI would make layabouts contribute to the economy. Yeah. That's the irony of it. If people will still spend money in the economy, give them £1,000 a month or €1,000 a month, they're still going to spend the money, even if they're not doing anything. Like if they have no intention of working anyway, what's the point in trying to force them into it?
Receiving social security have a duty to comply with those rules, and the government has a duty to help people. So we want to have that responsibility on both sides.
Okay, that's enough for that, because look, I keep saying there are some people who will never work, who don't want to work. Just forget about them in a sense. Focus on people who do want to. Focus on people who really need support. And don't be wasting time on forcing people who can't work into jobs that they can't do. It makes no sense whatsoever. I failed PIP, personal independence payment, I think it is, because the nurse, I said, scratched my nose during the interview, so I was fit to work. What? That's insane, Lewis. Like, how can someone say you scratch your nose so that you're able to work? I'm not questioning what yours. I'm not critical of what you are saying. I believe you because I've heard stories like that. But that's just beyond insane. Another problem with the DWP, lack of understanding, is that they haven't got a clue about disabilities, which are hidden. Well said, Ivan. Yeah, see, this is once again this problem. It's old mentality. I put it down to as a sort of old mentality or an ignorant mentality. Oh, you look like you can work. Yes, but I have, I'm suffering from depression. I struggle to get up in the morning. I need help to get up in the morning. I have other mental health issues that impact me doing a work. I can't focus, for example, or I can't remember things, or I'm not able to stick to a routine. The things that you would require in a job. Some jobs may be able to adapt to that. Not all jobs can. Some people who have certain health conditions that they need to take time off. Certain jobs may not permit that. But the only people who can judge these things are people who are experts, people who understand, not the average person on the street. And you can train up DWP staff to a certain level, but they won't be doctors. They won't be nurses. They won't be psychologists or psychiatrists. They won't be experts. Because that's not really a requirement of their job, and it should not be a requirement of their job. Their job should be, you come into the job centre, how can we help you? That should be what their first phrase is. What can we do for you? I'd like to find a job. I can't find a job at the moment. I don't know how to write a CV. I'm not sure how to do interviews. Okay, let's organise something for you. Let's organise some training for you, how to write your CV, how to present yourself, what to talk about, what to say at the interview, what not to say at the interview, what jobs would suit you, not what jobs we need to force you into. And in most cases, those people will be more likely to stick with the job and maybe build a career out of that. But instead, it's the opposite. It's not the carrot, it's the stick, it seems. Let's force these people into... I saw you walking in the door, means you can walk. Yes, you're walking a bit sort of strange, but that's okay. You can work in a warehouse, or you're a bit overweight. Maybe working in the warehouse will help you out. These are the sort of things that people will say because they have no understanding of the reality of both physical disabilities and also mental disabilities or hidden disabilities as well. Wrong people, in charge of the job. People who don't want to work are the top 1%. Well said, Peter. They're called socialites. If you're poor and you don't want to work, you're called a layabout. But if you're rich, you're called a socialite. Rich unemployed people are called socialites. I always wonder, what the heck does Paris Hilton do? Paris Hilton doesn't do anything. She's just very rich because her dad was rich. He's rich. I don't remember. Maybe people don't talk about Paris Hilton anymore. I'm old school, early 2000s. Tories for prison 2025. Did it for decades. I went to uni despite being in a secondary school. The DWP have been unfit for purpose for decades. Idlers are middle class. DWP staff think their measures are pointless as well. Really, it's nothing different from what the Tories did. Just with a more palatable veneer. People believe things have maybe improved, or we have a friendlier party in power, but it's the policies that are the core. It doesn't matter if the person beating you with a stick is doing it with a smile and a more palatable accent. No, you're still being beaten with a stick. So it's one of the big concerns I have is that we've heard two things here. One is that the Chancellor is saying government departments need to cut their funding. They're going to see funding cuts. They need to make cuts to their services. And then we have the DWP saying we need to force people, or we need to encourage people into jobs, because the DWP is a massive cost for the Exchequer. I see it as an investment, but they see it as a cost, and they believe that they need to reduce that investment. You notice it's always, if you're spending money on people, it's a cost. If you're spending money on business, it's an investment. Why are people talking about a hotel in Paris? Peter must be very young. Thanks so much for that, Peter. So, guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on. Thank you so much for your super chats. Greatly appreciated. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job tonight. Before we finish, we have our one for the road. I hope you enjoyed this. An American-style one for our American friends. I hope some of them are still on the stream tonight, so I hope you enjoy this.
It's the land of the free and the home of the save here at the American Fire Sale. We're a nation full of damaged goods, so everything must go before we relaunch in November. Live free or bye. Get star-spangled deals like these church and state separators. Now with AR 15% off. Or these ballot boxes, available to the highest bidder. And don't miss our Abe Lincoln Grave Spinner Special, the original U.S. Constitution. Now so cheapened, it's barely worth the paper it's written on. Buy the First Amendment, now just 50 pence. The Second Amendment is not for sale. But hurry, our best deals sell fastest. Democracy has already been sold out and equality is no longer available. So be quick and Mount Rushmore down to your local dealer now for E Pluribus Unbelievable savings. You'll be Gilead you did. God bless you and God bless the U.S. sale. Terms and conditions apply. All deals have been OKKK'd by the incredibly White House.
Oh, well done, Larry and David. So, Larry and Paul, sorry. Have a great week. I'll see you on weekend, I should say. I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. As always, stay safe, take care, and good night.